Welcome to Global Truth Podcast with Dr. Nasir Baig. On Monday, June 22nd, 2026, Sir Keir Starmer stood outside the famous Black Door of 10 Downing Street and announced his resignation. In doing so, he didn't just end his own premiership after less than 2 years, he guaranteed that Great Britain will soon welcome its 7th Prime Minister in just 10 years. To put that into perspective, from the late 1970s to mid-2000s, Britain had just 3 Prime Ministers: Margaret Thatcher, John Major and Tony Blair. Today, Downing Street operates less like a bastion of historic stability and more like a high-stakes game of political musical chairs. Why this unprecedented volatility? The roots lie in a decade of structural shocks. It began in 2016 with the seismic fracture of the Brexit referendum, which split the country and its political parties down the middle. That was followed by the acute stress of the COVID-19 pandemic, structural economic stagnation, and an electorate that has grown deeply impatient. British voters are no longer willing to wait for results. If a leader falters, the British political system, uniquely driven by internal party coups rather than fixed-term presidential elections, simply chews them up and spits them out. Just like that. And the latest casualty of this ruthless machine is Keir Starmer. When Keir Starmer won a historic landslide victory in 2024, he promised an era of boring competence. A former human rights lawyer, he was supposed to be the adult in the room. So where did it all go wrong? Starmer's downfall was a slow-motion car crash driven by 3 distinct factors: economic alienation, structural missteps, and a toxic political scandal. First, Starmer lacked an inspiring narrative. In his bid to prove fiscal responsibility, he made deeply unpopular decisions, like cutting winter fuel subsidies for elderly pensioners and reversing key welfare promises. The public, already battered by a high cost of living, felt no tangible improvement. Second, the political landscape shifted beneath his feet. The rise of Nigel Farage's right-wing populist party Reform UK began cannibalizing Labour's working class base. In municipal elections, Reform UK and an energized Green Party utterly routed Labour, sparking sheer panic among backbench MPs who feared they would lose their seats at the next general election. But the fatal blow to Starmer's personal authority was the Peter Mandelson scandal. Starmer's decision to appoint the controversial new Labour architect as Britain's ambassador to the United States backfired spectacularly when unredacted details of Mandelson's historic links to the billionaire sex offender Jeffrey Epstein came to light. Though Starmer eventually sacked Mandelson, the damage had already been done. The adult in the room suddenly looked politically compromised. The final trigger came just last week in a parliamentary by-election in Makerfield. A towering Labour figure stepped out of the regional politics, ran for the seat, and blew the opposition away with 55% of the vote in a heavily contested area. The man was Andy Burnham. His victory was a smoking gun. Realizing a quarter of his own MPs were ready to revolt, Starmer accepted reality, tearfully stepped down, and paved the way for the King of the North to claim the crown. So, who is the man poised to take the keys to number 10 unopposed? Andrew Murray Burnham. To the British public, he's simply Andy, a politician who has masterfully crafted an image as an approachable, football-loving everyman who can speak human to normal citizens. Born in 1917 near Liverpool to a telephone engineer and a receptionist, Burnham represents a unique demographic blend. He attended a local comprehensive state school but went on to study English at the University of Cambridge. This combination of working class roots to an elite Oxbridge education has become central to his political identity. Burnham is a veteran of the Labour machine. Entering Parliament all the way back in 2001, he rose quickly through the ranks, serving in the cabinets of both Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, most notably as Health Secretary. He ran for the National Labour leadership twice in 2010 and 15 and lost both times, famously being cast aside during the left-wing wave that brought Jeremy Corbyn to power. Recognizing that Westminster was gridlock, Burnham made a radical choice in 2017. He left Parliament to run for the newly created role of Mayor of Greater Manchester. It was a masterstroke. Away from the toxic bubbles of London, Burnham spent 9 years reinventing himself. As mayor, Burnham developed a distinct brand of politics that commentators call Manchesterism. Ideologically, he sits comfortably in the soft left of the Labour Party. He believes in strong state intervention, but pairs it with pragmatic, pro-business growth. Under his watch, Manchester's urban core transformed into a forest of skyscrapers, with its GDP per capita consistently outpacing the rest of Britain's. His signature policy achievement was the B network, taking Manchester's fragmented, expensive private bus system and bringing it under unified public control for the first time in decades. The result, a 12% increase in passenger journeys in just his first year. But what truly cemented his national legacy was his willingness to fight. During the 2020 COVID lockdowns, when Boris Johnson's government tried to impose restrictions on Manchester without providing adequate financial support for low-paid workers, Burnham took to the steps of the City Hall. In a raw, confrontational broadcast, he declared the government's treatment frankly disgraceful. He lost that specific financial battle, but he won the country's heart. He was dubbed the King of the North, sweeping his next mayoral re-election with a staggering 67% of the vote. He proved he could negotiate with opponents when there was a need to do so, such as securing bus funding from Johnson, but would fiercely defend his people when pushed. Now, as Burnham prepares to transition from a regional leader to a global statesman, a critical question arises. What does an Andy Burnham premiership mean for minorities, immigrants, and Britain's large South Asian and Muslim communities? To answer this, we have to look at how he governed Greater Manchester, one of the most ethnically diverse regions in the United Kingdom. Throughout his 9 years as mayor, Burnham maintained an exceptionally close, collaborative relationship with South Asian and Muslim diaspora communities. Unlike some Westminster politicians who treat minority areas as mere photo opportunities, Burnham integrated these communities into his core policies. Following the tragic Manchester Arena bombing in 2017, Burnham was widely praised for preventing community fractures. He actively resisted Islamophobic narratives, emphasizing solidarity and working closely with local mosques and community hubs to maintain social cohesion. On immigration and identity, Burnham offers a stark contrast to both Keir Starmer and the populist right. While Starmer often adopted conservative rhetoric on border controls to win back nationalist voters, Burnham's appeal in Makerfield proved you can defeat anti-immigrant populism through a focus on local economic dignity, better transport, jobs, and housing, rather than scapegoating minorities. For British Muslims and South Asians, the Burnham administration promises an approach rooted in civil liberties, public service investment, and an open-door policy for community representation. However, as a Prime Minister, he will face intense pressure from the right wing to curb immigration, meaning his inclusive ideals will face their toughest structural test yet. Now comes the ultimate political analysis. Can the King of the North successfully rule the entire realm? The transition from mayor to prime minister is a brutal psychological and systemic shift. As a regional mayor, your job is essentially to look after your city by begging, borrowing, or bullying money out of the central treasury. When things go right, you take the credit. When things go wrong, you blame London. But as Prime Minister, the buck stops with you. You cannot blame central government because you are the central government. Burnham will no longer have the luxury of just spending money. He has to raise it, manage bond markets, and make profoundly unpopular decisions. Burnham possesses an X factor that Keir Starmer completely lacked: authentic communication. He's a campaign heavyweight who can connect with working class voters without alienating the affluent middle class. If he can implement his Manchester model nationally, meaning bold infrastructure investment, aggressive devolution of power to local regions, and restructuring public services like the NHS, he could unlock the economic growth that has eluded Britain for 15 years. Furthermore, by bringing heavyweight allies into the treasury, he signals a willingness to challenge outdated economic orthodoxies. However, the headwinds are terrifying. Burnham inherits a stagnant economy, collapsing public infrastructure, and a volatile global landscape. Crucially, his entire political career has been domestic. He has virtually zero foreign policy, military, or international trade experience, a glaring vulnerability in an era defined by conflict and turbulent global trade realities. If he mismanages the financial markets or gets bogged down by Whitehall's institutional resistance, his high polling numbers will vanish just as fast as his predecessors. Andy Burnham's impending arrival in Downing Street represents a profound symbolic shift in British politics. It is a gamble by the Labour Party that a man of the people can tame an inherently cynical electorate. If Burnham succeeds, he will rewrite the economic geography of modern Britain. If he fails, he will simply become the seventh name on an ignominious list of leaders broken by a system that has fundamentally lost its way. The stage is set. The King of the North is coming to London. Whether he stays there remains to be seen. What do you think about it? Do you think he'll succeed or will he fail? Please do let me know in the comments. Take good care of yourself.